Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop. I am Naisha with the Holding Space Foundation, and I'm always excited to bring you the resources that we need for our community. So we have grief expert today. Sundari is a native New Yorker, whoop, whoop, born to yogi parents and raised with the teachings of indigenous healers. In 2007, at 27 years old and 7 years after being a caregiver, Sundari lost her mother to breast cancer. 4 years later, she lost her father to brain cancer. Since Sundari has made it her mission to equip people with the tools they need to manage life's greatest transitions since then. Sundari is a birth, grief, and death doula. She sits as the BIPOC grief educator and care curator for the dinner party. She is the founder of A Healing Doula and an author of the book Grief Gems. She is a full-time traveler and is currently living in Germany. So she'll share her presentation and we'll answer some questions toward the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naisha, and thank you to this community for having me here with you today. I'm going to share my screen, and Naisha, you can let me know if you can see this. Okay, great.
Yep,
And
we
I'm
can.
just going to minimize this a little bit. Okay, so you are with me today at how to show up for the griever you love and the griever in you. What to expect today. I would like to share what brought me to this work. I'm going to give you tangible ways to show up for yourself and fellow grievers. You're going to learn a bit about Indigenous holistic care, and we're going to practice applying some of these methods today. I'm going to see if I can move this taskbar out of the way a little bit. Maybe that's a little better. I am also going to be sending these slides to Naisha after this, so while I would recommend taking a few notes, I am going to send this to you. Okay, so a bit about myself, what brings me to this work, and why do I think these workshops are so important. I spent almost a decade as a caregiver for my mother. She died with breast cancer in 2007. My father was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2010 and died in 2011. I've lost a few friends, and most recently, I experienced 2 miscarriages. I know grief intimately, and as a griever, I know how confusing and hard and at times truly isolating it can be. And that as a society, we are also completely unprepared to deal with grief. Most of us, especially Black and brown folks, grew up with families that said things like, God has a plan and don't be sad, baby, be strong. And we were all programmed by media that shows death and grief being wrapped up in 1 or 2 weekends and a new life beginning by the end of the movie. And while a lot of this is well-intentioned, none of it is particularly helpful or useful. And so my goal is always to have us all learn as humans how to do better by other grievers and how to do better by ourselves. Something I like to think about is that at some point we all meet grief face to face. And imagine what our world would look like if we all intimately learned how to show up for each other. If we each took personal responsibility for the care of our communities, if we were truly honest about our needs and paid attention to the nuanced needs of others. Imagine what becomes of a well-healed society. The best and most important thing I believe that you can do is to acknowledge that someone is experiencing grief and is grieving. You are not reminding them of something they've forgotten. You're not dredging up a painful memory. You are not ruining their day. Grief is always in the back pocket of the griever. So you showing up as a witness helps to lighten their load. You acknowledging their reality is healing. And so we're going to start today by acknowledging ourselves. So in the chat, who are you grieving? What are their names? We're going to add them to the chat, and I'll be reading the names as you do. It's because of these names that we are evolving in our care of others. in our care for ourselves. It's because of those we've lost that we decided to show up here today. And so for that, we thank them. So take a moment, add your names to the chat. I'll be reading as we go through. Alexander, Larry, paternal grandmother, Lorraine Brockman. Jane, grieving my 4 miscarriages. Tanika, Frank, Dora, Sheila Douglas, Miriam Cornelius, B. Glenn, O.B. Glenn, Benjamin, Mary, and Marjorie. Granny Betty Mae Kelly, Uncle Mike, Uncle Boofy. I'm missing some. Uncle Keith, Ace, Asa, Amy, deceased parent, Sherry, Marlena, grieving 4 miscarriage. My mother, Irene, and brother Jerry. You can continue to add your names and I'll read them as you do, but for a moment, let's take a minute to breathe. Jennifer, your grandma and aunt. Sit for a moment with the memory of those you've added to our session today, to our time together, and inhale to the count of 3 and exhale to the count of 5. Inhale to the count of 3 and exhale to the count of 5. One more breath this way. Larry, Leroy, Jane. Then take a minute to wiggle your fingers and your toes and stretch your body and take a big cleansing breath and notice how it felt to share your people. Junia, grandma. To be seen by others. Maybe it felt scary, maybe it felt really vulnerable, but maybe it also felt a little good in your heart. Acknowledgement will come up again later in our slide. Let's move on to a few more action items of care. So this is probably one of the smartest things I did when I was in some of my lowest moments. And I mentioned the ones that I used in my book. I've added different ones here and we'll go through them. A lot of us wonder why we're not handling certain situations well. And a lot of times it's because we're doing things in isolation that should be done within community. So lots of our people want to show up for us, but they don't know how. And this fixes that. This also weeds out the people that aren't really there for you. Because if you are clear and you ask and they still don't support you, these are not your people. And your relationship to them should be adjusted. Grief will show you real quickly who your real friends are. And this prevents you from wasting what very little energy you have as a griever on the wrong ones. So here's a few tasks. Say you are the griever. Hey, Steph, I'm having a hard time getting to the grocery store these days. Next time you go, can you text me? It would be really helpful if I could Venmo you and you could pick a few things up for me. Hey, Lisa, I'm feeling really lonely lately in my grief. On Sundays, can you just check in with me by text? It would be helpful to know that someone was thinking about me right now. Hey, Joe, I'd love to watch a few good movies, but I don't have the energy to find any. Can you send me a few funny recommendations? Nothing too heavy. But what if someone else is the griever? What seems like a really small effort for you is a huge effort to the griever. Something that someone did for me, and I will share it with you on the next slide, is they lit a candle. And they lit a candle in their own home. And they sent a picture with a voice note. They actually sent a video. So I'm gonna, okay. I'm going to pause the sound, but I would like to show you this. So this is from a candle company in Harlem, if you're in New York. She is also in Harlem, and this is a beautiful candle company, Black owned. And so it was called Beneath the Stars, and this was right after I'd had a miscarriage. And she sent me a video of this candle. She is speaking and saying just really beautiful healing words, but it's only a minute and 32 seconds, right? And yet I thought enough of this that I included it in this workshop because I think it's incredible. She goes on just to show me some cool matchboxes she had. So Witches Against White Supremacy, La Luna. But this didn't take a whole lot of her time, and it has moved me beyond words. Little things. What not to do when someone has just died, and you are the griever. Think that you're supposed to get over it. One of the most honest things somebody said to me when I lost my mother, so this was in 2007, I was 27, and she said, "You will never get over it, but you will learn how to walk with it." And I was so grateful for that. And it has bled into how I work with folks because I believe in being honest. Because these books that tell you there is some like finish line at the end of this are lying to you. And that is not setting you up for success. You don't get over it. You will get better at managing it. Believing that there are 5 stages. The tests prove that is a lie. In my Maury voice, it's a lie. There are endless stages, endless cycles, and some of them you will share with others, and some will be very specific to you and to who you lost. Saying yes when you want to say no. If there was ever a get out of jail free card, grief is it. Use it. Free yourself from unnecessary obligation. This is your time to pause. Letting others gaslight you into feeling better than you do. You will hear things like, "You seem like you're doing fine now. Good for you." Don't be afraid to respond with, "I'm good in this moment. I'm not always like this." Lying to yourself and others about needing or not needing more support. I urge you to take off your superhero cape. Grief is hard. And I believe on some level that there's a responsibility as a griever to be a way shower. And that means being as honest as possible about what it takes to move through this. Because to me, this is how communities shift their approach to healing, right? This is how societies change. But when we like stop pretending that this is something other than what it actually is, and we actually show up for people in the way that they need. Keeping assholes around. Grief will leave you with a 0% bandwidth for other people's nonsense. And so welcome that shift, because one day you're going to wake up and realize that you have narrowed it down to the people who truly love you and the people who pour into you the way that you pour into them. And that's a really beautiful life. What not to do when someone else has just died. When someone has just died and someone else is the griever, excuse me. So call them a loved one. This is important. I'll give an example. My father and I had a deeply complicated relationship, and I barely knew him by the time he was ill, and I didn't always like him. I still showed up as his caregiver, and I still experienced, and to this day still do, grief. But it was different from the grief that I felt from my mother. I say this to say that grief is universal, but the nuances of it are specific. When we say loved one, we are applying a label that may not, in fact, exist to somebody. And what you wind up doing is isolating that person, because now they have to show up in a context that you have invented. Instead, use their name. So my father was Frank. I wanted to express my condolences for the loss of Frank. Use their relationship. I wanted to express my condolences for the loss of your father. Just speak generally. I wanted to express my condolences for your loss. This is something at the dinner party that we really work very, very hard in training our community to eliminate from their verbiage. lost loved one. Assume because they are posting joy or you see them out that they are over it or you don't need to be aware of what they're carrying anymore. I'm really open on my social media, but that's because of the nature of my job or the nature of my work. But it still looks like I'm having the time of my life if you just look at it as a slideshow, right? And that's not a whole picture. And so we have to be careful to mind our perceptions. Speaking like you're a bumper sticker, no one wants to hear they are in a better place. You know what the griever thinks? As soon as you say that, the better place would have been here with me. They wouldn't want you to be sad. The griever is hearing, you don't want me to be sad, and I am sad, and there's no other way to be, right? Instead, say the real shit out loud. This is a really terrible situation, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Lisa. And I can't imagine, or I can imagine, how empty those words must feel right now. I love you, friend. Easy, right? Easier than we probably make it. Center yourself. The minute you bring up yourself and a loss that you've experienced, you're forcing the other person to now acknowledge you and offer you emotional support back. How exhausting for them. So there is a time to bond over shared loss, but this is not the time because we're talking about when someone has just died, right? This is the time to listen, to hug, to offer something helpful. That's it. I'm going to take a moment to check the chat just to make, am I missing anything? Okay. Okay. Just know that there will be time for questions, and I know I'm talking a little fast, but I'm going to try to cover any questions you might have at the end. Saying things like, let me know if you need anything. They need everything, right? And their brain fog, which most grievers go through, and perhaps awkwardness around asking for help, renders your offer basically useless. So instead, if you live near them, I'm going to the grocery store on Tuesday, send me your list, I'll pick it up and I'll drop it off. Tell them you're coming over on Saturday at noon and show up and do their laundry. If you don't live near them, go on Uber Eats, send them a meal, send their whole family a meal. Find a local house cleaning service, ask them what date and time is best for them, and then schedule it for them. And if you can, pay for it or get a group of friends to split the cost. Letting me know if you need anything does not help. Get offended when someone doesn't reply to you or gives you a one-word answer. So grief is overwhelming. And we need to learn how to extend people and ourselves more grace. They notice, I promise, they appreciate what you are doing. But humans, we all have this kind of built-in need for validation, right? Immediate validation of our good deeds. And when we don't get immediate validation, we say, well, fuck it. I guess you don't need it then. We should do different when it comes to grief, when it comes to a lot of things. But since we're talking about grief, this needs to be a time where we do different, right? Give people lots of leeway. Expect that you might not hear back from them at all. You should still continue in your care. Now, you might see the above list and think, oh no, I've said some of this or all of this, and that's fine. We're here to learn new things, right? Because when we know better, we do better. Okay. Talking about offering continuous care, because grief walks with you for the rest of your life. Sit with yourself in ceremony. This isn't just about the dead. I know that some people will think, well, then if you're asking me to sit with it, then you're asking me to sit in my pain, or you're asking me to sit in my loss. But in actuality, what I'm asking you to do is sit and honor what happened to you. Acknowledge through ritual that it shifted you, and pay respect to the old and new version of you. So begin a ritual every Saturday at 9 a.m., or maybe it's one Saturday a month and pick a time, right? But sit with yourself. I suggest setting up an altar, setting up some space that goes untouched, that isn't seen by everyone who walks in and out of your house. It does not need to be Pinterest ready, right? It could be a cardboard box covered in a sheet. Add a few candles, add a few pictures of those you've lost. Maybe you want to add a rosary or prayer beads or fresh flowers, but sit at it and breathe. I suggest gazing at a candle. And so you'll see this link, try to usher in your new ritual. I sent it to you. Candle gazing, really powerful for a lot of reasons. Closing your eyes can be really overwhelming emotionally. And that does not always, closing the eyes does not always sit well in people's soul. Candle gazing allows you to learn how to gently focus your eyes, right? Gently sit in this calm space, not be overwhelmed by darkness. And the benefit of it is that it helps improve focus, because grievers suffer with brain fog. I've mentioned that a lot. That is a real thing. And what winds up happening is that you get constant eye movement, because this is what happens with people who have problems focusing, the sign of an unrested mind. So candle gazing helps to improve focus. It helps your brain to settle. I suggest it. Your dates matter. Honor them. We call them angel birthdays, the birth date of the person you lost. Death anniversaries, the death date of the person you lost. You don't have to do anything, but your body has most likely ritualized them for you. So what does this mean? My mother's birthday is August 16th. Mine is August 17th. We celebrated together every year of my life until she died when I was 27. So around August 1, I start getting a little anxious. It's just the truth. It's been 17 years. I can't do math. She died on January 30th. Every year is different, but the memories of what that last winter were like begin sometime in December. And it goes until after her burial date on February 2nd. That is not like the same, everyone's not the same, but I suggest honoring those dates. Plan something alone or with someone else. Some people think they can only go to the burial site, but you can book a vacation, right? Book a facial, book a massage, book a walk with a friend. I used to plan a party every single year on January 30th. And I suggest planning in advance so that you don't have to do it when you are emotional on that day. You can always cancel if on the day of you prefer to stay in bed, but trying to make plans from a depleted state is exhausting. Right? Have someone to talk to, get it out of your body, find a therapist, right? And keep searching for one until you find the one that works for you. I tried like 3. Even better if you can find someone that has a background in grief. Finding a friend with a good listening ear. Join a community. If you don't know what the dinner party is, the dinner party is a grief nonprofit for people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. I started working with them in 2018, but I joined as a griever in 2013. Because what I learned, well, this is why I started working with them, because I saw like the joy and the beauty of the community, was that when I sat with folks my age who had lived similar situations to mine, it was life-changing. And then when you add in affinity spaces, like a table of Black and brown folks who are also grievers my age, it became soul healing. Because what I recognize is that my culture, and this has completely influenced how I work, culture impacts your approach to grief and healing. The self-care bowl, one of my favorites. I always remember when I was new to grief, like to losing my mother, I laid on the couch for like a month and just watched the Food Network and smoked a lot of weed. I really didn't do a whole lot of anything. And I had to come up with the self-care bowl so that I can continue to move through my life. And so I write down 8 things in the beginning of the month, add them to a bowl, pick one on a Saturday, pick one on a Sunday. And they are things like deep condition your hair, go sit in the sun, eat a piece of fruit. All the things that when you're moving through things, these are not, it's just not what you have the space for to make energy. You're not really thinking about being that healthy, right? You're just trying to make it through the day. You're not really thinking about deep conditioning your hair or wash day at all. Like these are things that just help keep you on track. and start to build momentum to walking back into life. Wellness practices. You hear words nowadays like somatic movement, meditation, breath work, because I'll be honest, the white mainstream media will co-opt and sell you back your own practices every day. None of this is woo-woo or new. There are images and examples of all of these modalities on ancient Egyptian temple walls. They are ours. They will anchor you. It is my deep belief that you practice them and it's like your soul remembers. It's a way to sit with your ancestors and to allow them to help you. I'm gonna check the chat. Okay, I'm hoping that there wasn't something big, but I'll go through it again at the end. Okay. Offering continuous care and someone else is the griever. So their dates matter. Put them in your calendar. Set a reminder for yourself 2 weeks before. If you're close with them, ask if they'd like you to plan an activity, right? But sending a message on that date is also just a beautiful thing to do. Thinking of you today. I have friends who have never missed my mother's death anniversary. Cell phones make this all real easy. If they bring their person up, continue the conversation. They don't need you to redirect the conversation or to distract them. Try not to say things like, don't cry, right? Because humans need to cry. It is cleansing. It helps us heal. Become aware of holidays and seasons. Here's an example. Your friend that lost their partner, Valentine's Day, and I would dare to say the entire month of February is probably a nightmare. Be aware of that. Offer support, right? For people who have lost a mother, that starts on the commercials, the songs, the merchandise in stores. That starts like a month and a half before. That's what people are going through every time they walk through a grocery store. All of their emails are about Mother's Day, right? It's like it's just becoming a bit more aware of what does this holiday look like for the people I love? What is this season for the people I love? Sending them resources, a link to join the dinner party, right? It's free. Most of the services are free. A link for a book, a link to an interesting podcast you listen to. Suggesting activities that offer care, because care is the last thing on their list. Make sure that it's something easy, right? So ayahuasca ceremony, probably not the best idea. Things that are going to unearth and excavate trauma they might not have sat with yet, probably not great. African dance class, yes, right? Find things, get them in their hips, in their root chakra, move that energy out. But offer things that you know are going to help without them having to emote so much. Something to note, the headlines. Consistently seeing images of people who look like us being murdered is causing massive amounts of collective grief, and it will excavate personal grief. So something to note is to give yourself and others grace. You might be like, why am I so upset about this? I mean, I know this is upsetting, but like I am feeling super low. Maybe it's because of how similar they look to you. Maybe it's because of how similar they look to your family. Maybe it's because you are picking up on the energy of the community that you sit within. That is something to pay attention to. Holistic and passive healing. So traditional Chinese medicine tells us that grief sits in the lungs and the small intestine. Ancient Egyptian texts teach that trauma sits in your root chakra, so right between your hips, right? We think that twerking is this like new thing. That is old, and it was because they were moving energy from what is called the emotional gateway, which is your hips and your root chakra. We've always been doing this. Or perhaps you read the study on why women who consistently hold in their emotions are more prone to autoimmune deficiencies. All this link is also in the slides that you'll receive. After losing my parents, I'll tell you, I gained 40 pounds. I also had massive fibroids and a terrible period and eczema. everywhere. There is nothing like trying to manage grief and then also trying to heal physically. And what happens is that when you're grieving, you tend to go down on all of the things that will keep your physical body healthy, right? But we must at least find ways to passively address the physical. We might not be ready to go to the gym, which I still hate to this day, but go to the gym or to do something that is like high octane energy, but we can do a few of the things that come on the next few slides. Okay. Mullein tea and other forms of this herb improve lung health and reduce symptoms of respiratory illness. Rose, gentle antidepressant, supports the nervous and digestive systems. Linden, also known as lime blossom, soothes the nerves. Tulsi, holy basil, my favorite. I'm growing a ton of it outside here. It helps to manage stress and anxiety. Ashwagandha, still take it every single day, balances hormone levels. You're going to notice, especially on the next slide, that hormone levels come up a lot. Why? Because when you are dealing with something like grief, with something traumatic, your body's response is to start shooting off cortisol over and over and over again. So what happens? Your adrenal glands drain and you are left frazzled and your hormones go completely out of balance. So what seems like, oh, I don't have to manage this, you absolutely do, because 5 years later, 6 years later, 10 years later, you are dealing with hormone issues because they weren't brought into check early enough, right? So these are things, if this was for somebody else, you could send them these teas, go on Amazon, send them holy basil, send them some ashwagandha with a little note on how to use it, which you could Google yourself. If it's for you, you could get these herbs, put them on your counter, buy loose leaf, like loose leaf tea, or buy them in tea bags and just make a plan to drink a cup of this, one of each, every day. Have a cup of tea. You're doing a beautiful thing for yourself. I like to make a blend of all of this. I call it the Grief Goddess blend, and I will send these as gifts to grievers, and I keep it in my cabinet. I see chat. Okay, just gonna keep going. These were all teas, all herbs, right? You can make these all into teas. You can also use rose for other uses, right? Mullein tea, some people smoke instead of weed. So these can all be used for other things, but we're talking about how to use them as teas. You can make tinctures from them. Depends where your holistic plant making is, but we are talking about teas for this reason. Foods. Garlic works overtime as a prebiotic, so it's helping to heal your gut because we learned ancient Chinese medicine sits within the small intestine, which screws up your gut lining, right? It helps support your immune system so you're not catching every cold because you are depleted. Mushrooms, gastrointestinal diseases, sweet potatoes, hormone production, cruciferous vegetables metabolizes estrogen. Dark leafy green supports your liver. Your liver holds on to anger. Grievers are often pretty angry, and the liver will deplete. And so if we're thinking about like, well, how am I supposed to help people with this? Well, if you're making food for somebody, you could just include some of these ingredients. If you're ordering food, include some of these ingredients, right? If you're the griever, start cooking with these ingredients. Passive healing, you know that you are doing something good for your body that's going to help your physical body. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left. We're going to do some movement together, and then I've included 2 slides for you to practice on your own. Qigong, right? Ancient Chinese. Gentle Kemetic, Kemet being the original name of ancient Egypt. So this is an ancient Egyptian yoga flow, not what we'll be doing today, but I've included it for you. Breath work, belly breathing, we'll be doing that today. Solfeggio tones, we're going to listen to, and I would highly recommend falling down this rabbit hole. So solfeggio tones, what are they? The natural frequency for middle A is 432 hertz, and it's known as Verity's A. And it's supposed to be a pure tone, pure mathematical tone that goes along with the patterns of the universe, because music, vibration, it's all math. It's said that the Rockefeller Foundation had an interest in making sure the United States adopted the 440 hertz standard in 1935 as a part of the war on consciousness, leading to musical mind control. And this was taught by the Germans, who were already using it. Solfeggio and other frequencies that center around 432 have been used throughout history and are now continuing to be introduced, especially within the medical field. Neonatal units are using it. Cancer therapy centers are using it to treat tumors because of the way that it regenerates the cell from within. So I suggest adding in solfeggio tunes, this sort of breath work, and this sort of movement. Again, passive healing, right? So let's get started with some movement, some breath work, some tones, and then we'll leave time for questions. How is everyone doing? Is everyone doing okay? Okay, I'm just going to assume yes. I can't see anyone but myself. We're going to start with everybody standing up. So wherever you are, if you are able to stand up, please do. Let your arms hang along your sides. Feel your knees get soft and your butt get soft. Let your fingers be soft. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then put your hands on your hips. And I just want you to make big circles with your hips and your torso in one direction as you breathe. And then reverse your circle. Come back to stand in the center of your hips. Take your arms up to the sky. And as you arch backwards, push your hips and your pelvis forwards. And then bring your hands to your hips as you slowly hinge forward like 30 degrees. That's it. Inhale, arms up, arch back as you bring your hips forward, butt forward. And then exhale, hands to hips, hinge forward slightly. And then keep folding over your legs. Let your arms dangle down by your feet. Shake your arms like spaghetti arms. Take a deep breath in and a long breath out. And then slowly roll all the way up. Keep standing and put one hand on your belly and one hand over your heart. The knees are still soft and the butt is still soft. And now your face and your shoulders are soft. Allow the next few breaths to happen in the belly. So that means when you breathe in, your belly should get bigger like a balloon. And when you breathe out, your belly should relax. This is the opposite of how you normally breathe. Most of us breathe into our chest. So this might feel weird. That's okay. Breathe in, expand the belly. Breathe out and let the belly relax. Take one more breath this way. Big breath into the belly. Slow breath out. Become aware of the hand over your heart. Feeling grateful for a moment for your heartbeat. For the blood that courses through your veins. For the life in your body. Notice the breath under the other hand and imagine that you can breathe between these two spaces. Breathe between the belly and the heart. After the next breath, take a seat. We'll spend a moment listening to a solfeggio tone. Let me know if you can hear this.
We cannot hear it.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to share my sound to make sure. Sitting for a moment in silence. Taking a moment to center yourself. Thinking of the names that you put into the chat as we entered. And again, sending them gratitude for the way in which they have opened you. For the way in which they have ushered you into caring more deeply for yourself and for others. Thank you for taking the time and making the time to attend today. I really hope that this helps. I hope it helps you and the people that you know and love. I'm going to leave some time for a question. This slide will be sent to you also. Just a few of my links. I'm also going to be offering you guys a 50% off discount to Staycation with Sundari, which is an at-home 2-day wellness retreat that I created for people just to have some peace without needing to travel. So I'm just really grateful for those who show up and want to know how to show up better. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So one of our community members, she had to leave, but I'd love to make sure I get her question answered.
Okay.
Thought I took a picture. Give me one moment. If anyone else has a question, please raise your hand or come off mute. I have to scroll up for her question.
Yes, please ask anything.
Okay, I found it. So what about the feeling
Okay.
of guilt of not getting a chance to tell your loved one how you truly felt? I'm assuming,
Oh,
yeah, how,
I love this one. Um, I'm a deep believer in that the physical relationship ended, the spiritual relationship did not, nor did the emotional one. And so, in order to fully heal, you're going to need to address what didn't get said. And you're still able to do that. When you have your altar, ancestral veneration is a real thing. And speaking to your ancestors or to the people who have lost as if they are still here and engaging in conversation, right? It's actually a much easier conversation than when it was here, right? I don't like what you did when this happened. I don't like how I felt when this happened. When we talk about sitting in ceremony and ritual, we're in a new moon a new moon just came on Sunday. I talked about my love of the moon. 3 days before and 3 days after is when you can capture the energy of it. New moons are great times to start new things. Start a ritual, right? The new moon is about what are we letting go of? So what do we want to start anew? Write a letter to that person that explains exactly how you feel. Exactly how you feel. And then burn it, throw it out, and make the decision that I do not want to carry this forward. Do that with the energy of the moon. It's what our ancestors did. If that feels like maybe that's too much for me. Now, here is the like, I want to give like a caveat to that. It is not then the idea that, oh, and now it's done because I burned it and threw it out. So it's actually never going to show up. You might not need to do that on 10 new moons, right? But you do it as if I am putting like a real effort to this. I'm getting it out of my body. I'm putting it on paper. I'm putting it to pen. I'm crumpling it up. I am energetically telling the universe, I am done with this. I am done walking with this.
Thank you so much
Hope
for
that
that.
helps.
Right. And I am looking, do you recommend any other Black authors? Nichelle is a social worker, and a lot of her clients need the non-white approach, which I'm very confident you have a plethora.
Agree. Oh, I'm gonna tell you, the mainstream grief conversation is white women, and that is just the unfortunate part of it. Dr. Meckle Harris is fantastic. I don't know if she has a book out as much as she speaks to grief fantastically and is just a wonderful person to follow. Mekel. I might be spelling that wrong. Harris. Yes, thank you, Naisha. Fantastic. She's actually we're doing a TDP grief camp for adults in October. It's all virtual, and she will be speaking at it. Josh Odom is Black Men Who Heal, and also just really speaks to like just to walking with grief. Lamar Odom, Black, queer, Buddhist author, phenomenal. Lama Odom. I think Lamar Odom is a basketball player. Lama Odom, right, is the Buddhist teacher. Those are it. Alicia Forneray does not write a lot in terms of books, but does opinion pieces, and has a collective out on the West Coast. We are it, and that is sad. It was honestly why I wrote my book, because when I was a griever, all I kept finding were white books written by white women that were completely unhelpful, and white therapists who cried and did not understand what I was talking about. And I was like, I'm done. And that's really what what propelled me, was like, there were no brown people in this space. There still are very, very few. So I wish I could give you a better answer, but there's like 5 of us. That's it.
Thank you for that. And AJ asks, how can I support myself when my grief is triggering an anxiety spiral?
By doing all of the things I said, like I like, that's a real honest answer. You have to be committed to, I'm going to put a couple of these into place. You don't have to do all of them, right? I'm going to add something in, and I'm going to continue to do this. I really recommend like the breath. When I suggest things like breath work, candlelizing, a lot of time candle gazing, a lot of times people think that that is like a thing you do when you are having the anxiety spiral. It's the practice you have to put into place so that your body begins to understand what rest and calm is, so that you have a better approach to the anxiety spiral. It's what keeps you more balanced so that you can approach what is inevitable with a bit of a clearer head, right? Your brain has to be trained like a muscle. Your nervous system, if you are like me, right, who's 44 years old walking around this world, I have had 44 years of this world making me nuts, right? I have to realize that I am kind of being you. We all are as humans. There is something that's setting you off all the time, whether you had no grief at all. And so you have to be, I call it like a co-creator with your temple, right? A co-creator with peace, a co-creator with, it does not just show up. I have to be active. And so if you find that I am triggered often and then I anxiety spiral, there has to be something put into place where I'm going to put certain practices in, like breath work, so that I can train my brain and my mind. But I'm also going to have maybe a friend that I call that is tasked with being the friend that I call when I'm spiraling. And maybe there's also a group that I can join that I know is happening every Sunday. So if I spiral on a Wednesday, I know what I have to look forward to, right? Because I bookended my schedule to encompass who I am, right? So if I am somebody who's anxious, then I have to do shit to help me get through that. I cannot expect peace and calm to arrive. You have to know, I call it be real comfortable with your crazy. I know my crazy. I know exactly what it is, right? So I have to bookend my day, my schedule, my friends. Bookend isn't the right word. I have to stuff, fill, flush out my world so that I have as much support as possible. Can you speak to supporting, did I see that question? Supporting a griever. You're also grieving the same person. Yes. That is a good point. I speak to this in my book. A lot of times you will grieve the same person with somebody completely differently. And that's really hard. It just is. That's really hard. Sometimes, like, oh, so an example, because I don't want to just use yours, is if somebody has lost a sibling, right? Or maybe there's two siblings who have both lost a parent, but they both had completely different relationships with that parent. There is grieving you're going to be able to do with that person, and then there is grieving that you are going to have to do on your own, where you can be honest about what your relationship was, right? And then there's going to need to be spaces where you can show up for them absent of what your relationship was. And so that involves some cognitive dissonance, right? Which is why we put these things into place so that we can be all of these things, right? It's why I have to drink the tea and eat the food and take hormone balancers. It's why I have to go to therapy. It's why I have to do yoga and meditate and sit at my altar. Like, I have to take my healing real seriously. And you will have to do the same for yourself.
Thank you so much. Um, okay, so when my friends or loved ones, or just people who have lost someone, I like in my head, I'm like, I need to give them time to breathe. I don't want to bombard them. I'm sure they've gotten a lot of texts and calls, but then I often feel guilty, like I need to show up for them. I don't know. This could be something.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
Stop pausing because you're overthinking it. Stop pausing. Like, I get where people are coming from, because you're like, they're probably getting a million phone calls or a million text messages. Let yours be one of them. Your silence is louder than you think it is. Grievers notice everything. I may not notice like who exactly showed up at my funeral, but I promise you, I noticed in the week that led up to it, who I did not hear from. I know exactly who I didn't hear from after, right? Show up early and show up continuously. It's not I'm there in the first couple of weeks and then I drop off. That's not helpful. And giving the breathing room, why? Send a message. She may not read it for a month. So what? At least she looks at the date and knows that you showed up when she was going through it. Because the griever has no point of reference to be like, oh, they're trying to give me space. What it looks like, if we're being honest, is you got busy and then you got to me when you felt like it. Sometimes we have to be like, stop expecting people to see us from like, but my intention was like, but what it looks like is her person died on February 2nd and she didn't hear from you until March 3rd.
Thank you for that. That makes sense. I'm in my own head. Okay.
Yeah, we always are, right? Like, you know what? Like, I feel like as Black folks, we understand this in the activist space, right? Like, when we have our white allies, we're like, stop overthinking this. Like, just be human, just show up, just like do what we learned in kindergarten, right? I sit in a lot of spaces where I talk about BIPOC grief and Black grief, and talking to white folks is always this kind of thing of just do what you would teach your child to do. Do what you learned when you were 4 years old, how you showed up for somebody. The same thing applies here. We become adults and we all want to be therapists. We all want to be HR managers, political analysts. Like, stop. Just be human. it doesn't matter. Like no one's expecting you to say the right thing unless that's the hat you wear in your everyday. Then like why would you know how to do it, right? Like why would you be good at this? No one needs you to be good at this. We just need you to show up. Don't overthink it. My friends, who write to me on death anniversaries, they're not sending me paragraphs. They're sending like thinking of you. That is literally all I need. Like people want to sit and like, well, what is this perfect sentiment? There is none. Nothing brings their person back. So stop trying to like resurrect the dead. You are literally just trying to give care. That's it.
Thank you for that. I definitely needed that. That will help moving forward. All right, so we are at time. I know you were in your presentation, but the chat was blowing up with your appreciation, our appreciation for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of us needed this, and I will send the recording out because I know people are going to need it even more. And that is it for us. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't. Thank you. I'm going to send Naisha the slides and I'll send some links and your discount code and then ways to stay in touch. And we'll